ovdje razmišljam, želim malo otići da nije akademiju danas izbor. Gore, jel da? Ranger. Svega trebamo zbog AGM-a pa ne prestane.
Kako će biti...
Onda će ostati, a onda će se posle napiti zbog onih kolima. Dobro, eto, pa ćemo tako. Je bio izvrstan, a? Bilo je.
A ima svakom baš područje, recimo informatici, isto ima svakih ljudi.
Guru, on izgledao, nema prezentacije, ništa. Govorio što? Je, okej.
So use this microphone.
You can use the wireless, I think. Radi wireless mikrofon?
Hello. Should I start or wait? Okay. Oh, it feels so empty now after all those people have gone. Do you want to come close to the front? It feels a bit. I feel a bit scared with all these people that are all in the distance. It feels a bit more intimate. Oh, thank you. Oh, you're very kind. Normally when I ask people to do that, they will stay at the back and say, I'm hiding.
Leave me alone.
Okay. Oh, dear. Okay, so, wait till you settle down a little bit. Okay, so I can start. Hello, my name is Jeremy Day. I'm an English teacher and a writer and an editor. I'm based in Warsaw in Poland. And this is my first time at the Kupe conference. I hope I'll have a chance to come again, so I'm very happy to be here. It's very nice. I specialize in ESP. That's my main area. And my topic today is about needs analysis. Right, well, okay. ESP. I do a lot of talks about ESP, and there's something I always have to check before I do my big talks about ESP. A few years ago I was in Austria, and at the end of the talk on ESP, there was a lady in the audience. At the end of the talk, she put up her hand and said, "Sorry Jeremy, you've been talking about ESP. What is ESP?" Okay, thank you. So just in case that lady from Austria is here again today, ESP is for specific purposes. So for example, things like English for architecture, English for engineering, medicine. Okay, thank you. Right. Okay. Do we have some ESP teachers here? Few. Okay. The others maybe teach ESP one day in the future. No, you're in the wrong session. Okay. There's an interesting study. You maybe have heard of this from David Graddle. He studied the future of English and trends in English teaching. And one of his big conclusions was that the teaching that's happening in schools at the moment, in primary schools and state schools, is so good and starts so early that soon, by the time the current generation of children becomes adults, they won't need general English courses anymore. What they will need as they get older will be more and more ESP, specialised English. So he saw a big growth in English for children and a big growth for ESP. So if you're not currently teaching ESP, you may well be teaching it quite soon. Okay. My talk today is about needs analysis, and needs analysis is the most important part of an ESP course. The theory is that our students know exactly what they need, and we ask them what they need, and they tell us what they need. We then create a course based on those needs to fulfill those needs, and then we teach the course and we fulfill the needs, and at the end of the course the student doesn't have the needs anymore, they just have these can-do statements, what they can do. They don't need it anymore, they can do it. So that's the theory. The practice is much messier than that. The practice, it doesn't always work like that. So this presentation is really about the messy side of needs analysis. And in fact, that would have been a better title than my title, the messy side of needs analysis, but it's too late to change it now. Okay. I'm going to show you a few of the things that I've worked on first. I'm not going to spend too much time showing my book, but I just want to give you a bit of background to who I am. My first book, we published books was the teacher's book for International Legal English. So I've done a lot of work with legal English, and I wrote the teacher's book for this one. We've got the second edition just out last year. I also co-wrote the teacher's book for Flight Path Aviation English. I worked with a very experienced pilot and air traffic controller who also wrote that with me. I did the teacher's book again. I did the teacher's notes for dynamic presentations and lots of other books in this series for business skills series for Cambridge. Again, the teacher's notes. This one was written by Mark Howell, wonderful book. And this is my baby. Where's my baby? Where's my baby? My baby's there. Okay. My particular baby is, I was the co-author of Active Grammar Level 3, which is a new grammar course edited by Penny and I'll be talking about that tomorrow, so this is not ESP. I'm also a series editor. This is my series. I'm a series editor of Cambridge English 4, which is a series of short ESP courses. We launched about 4 years ago with engineering, media, job hunting and nursing. Then we brought out a new level of nursing, pre-intermediate and marketing. And then last year we had scientists and human resources. So that's my babies again. My role as series editor is I work with the subject specialists who write the courses. So they bring the subject expertise and I bring like the methodological expertise and quality control. I make sure that if you are familiar with one book, you know what to expect from another book in the series. Okay, so that was my book. Sorry. A quick question. Whose needs are we talking about? Whose needs are important in the business English or ESP classroom? Whose needs? Students? Yeah, that's good. I didn't think of that. No, it's good. Okay, students. Okay, that's fine. Or the learners. Okay. Anybody else? Oh, the institution. Okay. So more generally, I call this the person paying for the course. So yeah. Anything else? Anybody else? Teacher? Possibly. Teacher has needs. I'll talk a little bit about teacher needs later. And then there's someone else. And I'll call that person someone else. Okay, I'll come back to that in a second. And I'm going to work through these one at a time. Starting with the person paying for the course. So for example, if you teach in a university or in a college, who's paying for that? The state. And ultimately it's the taxpayer. So it's the taxpayer of the state. And we're, in a way, we're satisfying their needs. We can't just address the needs of our particular learners. We need to make sure we're giving good value for money for the state and for the taxpayers. If you're teaching in a professional language, professional training centre, for example, for air traffic controllers, again, it's the state, it's the taxpayer whose money we need to make sure is well spent. If you're teaching in a private language school, then we need to think about the needs of who pays there. Very often it's the parent or the employer, sometimes maybe the student themselves. We need to think about their needs. If you're doing in-company lessons, then very often it's the employer who's paying for this. And we need to think about this very, very, very much. Years and years ago, I had a course, English for regional sales managers. And I spent a couple of weeks writing this course, and then the company sent me down to the Polish mountains to a beautiful ski resort to spend a week with these sales managers to teach them English. And as I said, I spent weeks preparing this course. I spent a week there, working really hard, trying to teach these guys English, trying. Because they weren't interested. They weren't interested at all in what I was doing. All they wanted to do was ski and swim and drink. Yeah, not interested in English. And my job, I had to keep reminding myself, was not to keep them happy, but to make sure that their employer was getting good value for money. Although I guess their employer didn't really care. Their employer was a cigarette company and they had loads of money. And I calculated at one point that these guys spent more on wine than they did on me, which was a bit, put me in my place a little bit. Okay. Someone else. I'll give you some clues about who I mean by this someone else whose needs are important. If we're talking about aviation English, who might that someone else be whose needs are important? Passengers, yeah, exactly. And sometimes our needs as passengers clash with the needs of the pilots and the air traffic controllers, and I'll give you a concrete example of that, how that works later. In the context of legal English, that someone else could be the clients. client's need. The client has different needs from the lawyer. And again, I'll give you some concrete examples of that later. In nursing, we talk about patients here. And certainly when I was working on this book, the patient's needs were in many ways more important than the learner's needs. We were obsessed with making the learner's experience as good as possible, or as less bad as possible. This book, by the way, is for pre-intermediate level nurses. If you can imagine having a life-threatening illness or in hospital for a horrible medical procedure, and your nurse has pre-intermediate level English, that can be quite traumatic. I mean, it's going to be traumatic anyway. There's a unit in this book about dealing with dying patients, quite heavy stuff. Your nurse is pre-intermediate level. That person needs to understand patient needs very, very strongly. Okay. The learners. Yeah, I forgot about the learners. Learners' needs are important. Yeah, okay, learners' needs. What do I mean by learners' needs? Just a second, I need to get some water. Okay. Okay, we need to focus on what they need, which is what they actually need to do in their professional lives, in their jobs. But we also need to think about what they want. So when we do a needs analysis, when we ask them these questions at the beginning of the course, what do you need? We also need to identify what they want, what would motivate them to learn, what would make the course enjoyable for them. And we also need to focus on their lacks. And their lacks are the things they can't currently do, that they need to do, that they would like to do. I'll give you a concrete example of this now. Some years ago, I wrote a course, English for European Patent Attorneys. If you're familiar with patents, these intellectual property, when you protect your invention and so on, patent attorneys need to be they need to think like engineers, and they also need to think like lawyers. They need to have the best of both worlds. Very, very complicated procedures, writing applications, defending these applications in court and so on. So I spent a week in Munich, in their head office, in the European Patent Office in Munich, learning all about their procedures, what they do, how it works, how to apply for a patent. I watched people in these tribunals having these arguments, learnt everything, wrote a wonderful course. This was for the British Council. And then I came back to Poland and I started teaching this course for a group of patent attorneys. And it was fine, it was okay. But then after a couple of weeks I realised that actually they knew all of this already. This was new and interesting for me, but for my students, this was what they did, this was their job, and they weren't really getting anything new out of it. What they actually what they lacked was the language of writing to their customers to demand money from late payers, which I didn't know about before. Because very often, apparently, with these patent attorneys, they do the work for somebody, and then that person decides not to pay them, and that's their biggest problem that they have to deal with. So they actually need to teach them how to write emails which are forceful but still delicate. So I did that and put that in the course and so on. The mistake I made was I focused too much on needs and not enough on lacks at the beginning of the course. And I think as teachers and as writers of courses, we need to be aware of these lacks as much as anything. This, of course, relates to all the language areas. So grammar and vocabulary, functional language and pronunciation. So when we're doing a needs analysis, I can use this as my checklist. What grammar do you need, and what do you want, and what do you lack? What's the vocabulary areas? What are the pronunciation areas? Functional language. Then what do you need to read in your job? What do you need to write in your job? And then we teach them systematically how to read that and how to write this particular thing. Who do you need to listen to? What situations do you need to listen? When is listening difficult? How can I help you to listen more effectively? The same with speaking. Who do you need to speak to? Where do you speak to them? What do you need to speak about? How can I help you to speak? Maybe there are some business skills as well, like negotiation skills or presentation skills that they need. Maybe some technical skills as well, like writing a contract, for example, or writing a patent application. Maybe some study skills as well, even things like how to learn vocabulary or how to balance fluency and accuracy, this sort of methodological skills that we teach them. So all of this comes up in the needs analysis, and I could probably speak for an hour on each of these, but I'm not going to. I'm going to move on. But when I'm doing needs analysis, I include questions about all of these for these three levels. And that's all very nice. But then we get into these problems, which is what I was talking about at the beginning, the problem with needs. And I'm going to give you some examples of problems with these. For example, they don't know what they need. Yeah. What do you need? I don't know. Okay, thank you. That's the end of the needs analysis. Or even worse than that, they know exactly what they need, but it's too specialised. Yeah. So what do you need? I need this and this and this and this and this and this. Okay, I'm an English teacher. It's very scary. I've been in that situation many times. Or they don't want what they need. Or the opposite problem is they don't need what they want. I'll explain these in a second. Or the final problem is what they need now isn't what they'll need later. And that's what I want to talk about first. I'd like you to think back to when you're at university. Okay. I won't comment on how long ago that was. I was at university I finished university about 20 years ago, so 22 years ago. Think about how the world has changed, maybe since I was at university. I mean, not just the political changes about which countries existed, which ones didn't, but we've heard about the internet and texting and all of that sort of thing. When I was at university, we didn't have any of that. We still wrote by hand, we wrote out essays by hand, and didn't send emails and anything like that. And think about how your needs have changed. When I was at university, I didn't study teaching, I studied geography and economics with a bit of Spanish. Completely unrelated to what I'm doing now. So with my geography, I learned how to draw maps with special pens, which is not especially useful for me in my current career. And I guess nobody still does that anymore. Probably they use computers now, but this is what I was learning at the time. If you were designing a course, an English course, you've got this problem. How on earth can you predict what somebody's going to need in their future career? And I mean, I can't actually give you the solution to this because there's no way of predicting this. We can't predict it. All we can do is, I think we have to teach them what they need now. For example, if they are university students, we teach them the study skills that they need in their university career. We need to teach them how to read academic books. We need to teach them how to interact in their university career and prepare them a little bit as well for the career they will have in the future. But we can't predict it. We also need to try to predict the future, but not the future of the world or the future of the internet or whatever. We need to predict their future. So, okay, this guy is a 22-year-old university student, but 5 years from now, he'll be a 27-year-old engineer, for example. So we can at least predict what 27-year-old engineers need, and therefore we can use that to predict what our students will probably need. And the world may change, but it won't change that much. And I think that relates to what David Crystal was saying earlier, that the world actually doesn't change that much. And this is actually my final point. Teach them the professional skills that they are bound to need. So even though, as I say, when I was at university, we didn't have emails, we didn't have the internet. But the writing is still the same. We still need the same skills. We still need meeting skills and negotiation skills and the ability to communicate something to a dying patient. That hasn't changed in 20 years. You need to speak clearly, a lawyer speaking clearly to a patient, to a client. That hasn't changed in 20 years. A lot of things don't change. And I think we need to focus less on the changes and the unpredictability and focus more on what we can predict. A quick case study, scientists. What do scientists need? I didn't know this, I'm not an expert in scientists. Fortunately, when I was working on the book, English for Scientists, this was the one that came out last year, I've got a colleague in Cambridge, at Cambridge University Press, who went around Cambridge University and asked all these amazing scientists, international scientists, about what they need English for, what problems they have, and came back with this amazing list of things. And it's things like applying for research funding, critical reviews, designing and describing experiments, drafting and writing papers. It's a huge area, this academic papers. In fact, most of the book is dominated by this topic of how to write a paper, an academic paper. During their career, they might need to take part in meetings with other scientists or with their supervisors, for example, keeping lab notebooks as a whole linguistic area of different techniques for lab notebooks for scientists. Then turning those notes into something more formal. That's, again, an important skill that they need. Giving papers at a conference, huge area for scientists. And socializing at a conference, which is one of those things that we perhaps don't teach enough the skills of, but actually that is what scares people more than anything. Again, one of my patent attorneys, when I was teaching her, she was giving this paper at a conference in America, and she was not worried at all about giving the paper. What she was worried about was the bits between the presentation, and that's what I needed to train her on. So this is the sort of thing that scientists need. And I'll just give you some examples from the book, English for Scientists, Cambridge English for Scientists. This is an example of lab notes, the sort of language that scientists need to write. And you can see it's very different from the language that we are used to. And there's lots of abbreviations, W/V is weight per volume, and this little squiggles and dots and so on. So they need very, very different language. And we also need to train them to turn something like that into something like this. This is actually the same experiment described first as notes and then as a formal written up experiment. So we need to train people how to write both forms. And as I said, lots of work on conferences. This particular Unit 10 has stuff on giving papers at the conference, socialising and presenting a poster. Because something, again, I didn't know this, scientists for their conferences are very often poster presentations. They don't stand up in front of an audience, communicating like I'm trying to do, but they actually stand in the corridor and present their research in posters. So that's again a very important set of needs for them. You can only find out about these needs by asking experts. As I say, I didn't know any of this. That's why it's not full of my ideas, it's full of an expert's ideas. The next question was, yeah, they don't need what they want. Let me think of my example for this. I guess it's lawyers. Okay. Let me just check the time. It's going to be okay. We started, so and it's lunchtime afterwards, okay? You don't need lunch, yeah? Okay, we'll be fine. Okay, so they don't need what they want. Years and years ago, I was writing my first legal English course for the British Council. We did a needs analysis of a group of lawyers, and we asked the lawyers, what do you want from your English course? And they identified lots of things, but the biggest thing was this thing called legalese. Have you come across legalese? This legal language that lawyers use. So like Chinese or Japanese, this is legalese. So the legal language, these long sentences, technical language, rich vocabulary, amazing words, complex grammar. They wanted to sound impressive. They wanted their customers to say, wow, that's a good lawyer. He really sounds like a lawyer. That's what they wanted. So after speaking to the lawyers, we then spoke to their bosses. And their bosses told us something different. They said, please, no, our clients don't understand when they talk. Please teach them to use simple language. Please teach them this thing called plain English. Plain English is language that we would understand. Please teach them that. They need to simplify their language. They need to use everyday vocabulary. Short and simple sentences, they need to be understood. Now lawyers, if you try and teach them all of this stuff, everyday language, short sentences, they hate it. They hate all of this. Oh, we don't need this, we don't need this. But they do need it, and that's why we need to focus on their customers as much as them personally. The solution, my simple solution, is to give them a bit of both, basically. You have to give them what they want, you have to make them satisfied, because otherwise they will be demotivated, and ultimately, as an English teacher, they're not going to value you if you tell them all the time that you know better than they do. But you also need to give them lots of other things too. In other words, we need to teach them how to communicate to clients. And this book I mentioned before is full of both types of language. The language of fancy, wonderful, exciting technical language, but also explaining this to clients. Lawyers are horrible to teach. Who teaches lawyers?
I
did. Yeah, I did as well. Yes. Okay. Luckily not anymore, yes. I know the feeling. Yeah. No, they're wonderful. They're super intelligent and lots of fun. And you can learn a lot from them, but they don't need what they want. Or they don't want what they need. They don't believe you when you tell them that their clients don't understand them. They don't want what they need. This is the next set of people I've had problems with. Air traffic controllers. a couple of years ago, I said last year, this book came out, this Flight Path, Aviation English, and I co-authored the teacher's book for that. And as part of my research for that, I went to Warsaw Airport. I went to the control tower to speak to the trainers, the language trainers, and also to the controllers, and to see what they did in their job. So I actually went up into the control tower, overlooking the whole of Warsaw Airport, and it was fantastic. Really exciting, actually. Then I went underground and saw the people who were controlling all the skies over Poland. It was really cool. But when I was up in the tower, one of the controllers, I was introduced to the controllers. This is Jeremy, he's an English teacher, he's going to write a book for aviation English, and the reaction was explosive. English teacher? Yeah, okay, this is it. We don't want an English teacher coming in and telling us how to do our job. They are very hostile towards English teachers in air traffic control. And once this one controller started this, they all started getting angry. What's going on? What's going on? And these guys are supposed to be controlling the airport. Hang on, there's a plane landing here. But, okay, it was quite scary. But the reason they're hostile to English teachers is because their jobs are under threat. Because of English teachers, because of English teaching. There's a new procedure, new rules, which mean that they need to understand plain English. They need to be able to communicate in general English. Previously, they had this codified language. It's called standard phraseology. And they're very proud of standard phraseology. It's a wonderful language. They say standard phraseology allows me to cope in every situation. Have you come across this fixed, codified, simplified language that they use? It's fantastic. And it does allow them to cope in nearly every situation. Nearly every situation. They say, if I start speaking this so-called plain English, it will put lives at risk. And it's true, it will put lives at risk. If they start saying, hey man, how you doing man, instead of doing their proper thing in the control tower, if they start chatting in general English, that would be awful. But that's not the point. I went back, after speaking to these controllers, I went back down to the training centre and I spoke to the head of the language training centre there, and I said, it's a big mistake, they don't need it, they don't need this plain English, they told me. And he said, ignore them. They're always like that, they always complain about it. That's not what they actually need. They need plain English, and they need it for unexpected situations. For example, if there's a dog on the runway, there's no word in standard phraseology for dog. They still need to be able to communicate that there's a dog. Maybe in standard phraseology they can communicate there's an object on the runway. An object could be a coat, it could be an egg, it could be anything. They need to be able to communicate. They need to be able to communicate that a passenger is ill, maybe, and speak to somebody on the ground and say, what's wrong with that passenger? And so on. They need this language. My advice here is, show them respect. If you're teaching this to the people, show them respect. Don't tell them how to do their job. But persuade and negotiate. Try to keep them happy and motivated. Bring them along with you, but you've got to give them what they need as much as what they want. And you've got to remember the needs of the other people who aren't in the classroom. In this case, it was the passengers. These pilots are actually worried about losing their jobs, because if their English is not the specified level, they will lose their jobs. And these are very good jobs, very well-paid jobs, and they love their jobs. They call themselves masters of the universe, because they have hundreds and hundreds of people's lives in their hands every minute, and they love this excitement, and they get lots of money for it. If they lose those jobs, they'll be very angry. But ultimately, it's about somebody losing his job and somebody losing his life. Us, basically, as passengers. And that's actually more important. We need to be firm, and we need to refer to authorities that they will respect. And by the way, I'm not just talking here about air traffic controllers. I hope you see that this actually applies to all sorts of groups of people that we might be teaching. What I mean by authorities they respect, things like this ICAO, the International Civil Airline Organization. They've actually produced these guidelines. So it's not a group of English teachers that have decided this. This is their bodies, their professional body that's decided this. And a nice quote at the beginning of the book, When controllers and pilots better understand the language is imperfect medium and is easily misinterpreted, they will be careful in their use of both standardized phraseology and plain language, and the airways will be safer because of it. So it's about making the airways safer. It's about teaching them the language that they need to make the airways safer, not just what they want. Okay, they don't know what they need. Yeah, this is a terrible problem. You ask them what they want, I don't know, I'm going to blame them. Give you an example from, okay, I'll give you an example in a second. If they don't know what they need, we, as teachers, we need to be the expert. We need to know what they need. And if we can't be an expert ourselves, we need to ask an expert. This is what I do in my work as a series editor and with the books I work on. I always work with subject specialists. If you're teaching ESP, you cannot rely on your own intuitions as a teacher. You need to ask experts. If you teach in the university, you've got experts all around you. Subject specialists. If you teach English for biologists, go into the biology department and make friends with a biology professor or whatever and learn about their needs in that way. Don't try and rely on your intuitions as an English teacher. Ask experts. If you're not lucky enough to work in a university, there are other ways of asking experts. For example, your colleagues, maybe your colleagues in the place where you work have taught this subject before, and maybe they can help you. If you are lucky enough to be teaching a subject which has a teacher's book, the teacher's book is full of expertise. And I'm not just saying that because I wrote it. The expertise is not my expertise, it's just stuff that I found all over the internet and put together to solve all the problems. In some ways, I'm kind of the expert, non-expert. The non-expert. I'm very good at being a non-expert by asking really stupid questions. Why is it like that? What's the difference between that and that? I don't understand that. Can you explain it to me? And I find all the answers to that and put all of that in the books. That's my main job. It drives other people crazy. People have got to provide the answers. But I think it works. I think it makes the teacher's life much easier. Wikipedia is always my first place to check. Of course, there are problems with Wikipedia, but check it. Find out about anything about the subject areas. Ask your other students. As a legal English teacher, something I discovered that was really nice. The first time I taught from a unit in the book, for example, I would make notes of what my students said as I was teaching. So, for example, how this law, this British law, for example, corresponds with something in Poland, or how the differences between them, or how to translate this word, or any interesting points. I would make little notes in my book. And then when I came to teach that lesson the second time, maybe with a different group in the same week, I was able to refer to those notes and say, oh, did you know it's slightly different in Poland? And it's quite impressive. And then I added more notes, and by the end of, let's say, the third or fourth time, I really was an expert on those particular aspects of law and legal English. It was brilliant, it was wonderful. You can learn a lot from your students, and you need to learn actively from them. Try to write things down and try to get them into your head. There are lots of discussion groups as well. Have you come across any of these? EULETA is the European Legal English Teachers Association. If you teach legal English, you need to go to Google and find this, and there's discussion groups and there's websites and so on. Very, very useful. I very often write a message to this group and get replies from real experts. What's the difference between this and this? And I get replies from this group. It's fantastic. So that's for legal English. IATES is the International Association of Technical English Trainers. So anything with technical English, you can ask this group. BSIG is the Business English Special Interest Group of IATEPL. So again, anything about business English, write to this group and you'll get brilliant replies from experts. These are all, the best way to do this is through Yahoo groups. So if you want to search for EULETA Yahoo or IATEP Yahoo, then you'll get straight to the discussion groups. Well worth doing. And there are these for medical English and so on. We have HR professionals. What do HR professionals need? As English teachers, we have a vague idea of what HR professionals need. I have had a lot of contact with HR professionals, organising training courses, maybe when I had a job interview. I think I know what HR people do. The problem is, that my contact with HR people is not representative of their work. I can't assess what they need, what they do in their job, just by my contacts with them as an English teacher. In other words, I can't guess what their job involves just from those contacts. So you need to ask experts, you need to ask specialists. Do you know what HR people do all day? Any thoughts? Anyone teach English with HR? There are all sorts of amazing things that they do, but I didn't know any of these things. So I asked experts. George Sanford, the guy who wrote the book Human Resources, is a real expert in this subject, and he also contacted world-class experts around the world to guide us through this. We found out things like, okay, some things are obvious like interviewing and selecting, coaching, mentoring, and counselling. Very, very important language areas. You know the difference between coaching, mentoring, and counselling? Actually, I'll explain in a second, but these are three sets of skills for HR professionals. Performance reviews, or these, what you call them, the assessments, the evaluations, things like discipline and grievances. So if somebody's in trouble, you need to tell them off, and you need to deal with their complaints about what's happening in the company. Also concepts, things like an HR strategy. I didn't know about this. HR strategy, do you know that HR people have strategies? Actually, strategic HR is one of the biggest buzzwords now in HR. They're obsessed with strategy. They want to be seen, HR people want to be seen really at the center of a company, of their business, right next to the CEO. CEO, HR manager, that's the most important people in the company. Resource and talent management is an important thing they deal with. If you think about it, HR actually is quite an important part of a business. We tend to think, oh, it's just some person in an office dealing with little admin jobs. But actually, for many companies, their people are the most important asset they've got. And the HR department is responsible for managing those people. It's a huge responsibility. It's a hugely important strategic job in a company. Designing competence frameworks, so what you should be able to do and what you, in order to judge how well you are doing what you should be able to do. Almost like can-do statements in our industry. And HR branding. Do you know anything about this? HR branding, that they need to brand themselves within an organization. I'll give you some examples about. At the top here, we've got coaching, mentoring, and counselling. Could you try to map 1, 2, 3, ABC? I'm going to get a drink of water. I like it. Okay, so coaching is developing a person's. Hello? Are you serious? Skills and knowledge, yeah. Coaching is developing their skills and knowledge so their job performance improves. So this is the general sort of training things they do. Mentoring is when someone receives help from a personal manager in making transitions. So yeah, it's not the same as coaching. It's guidance through difficult transitions in their career. They just had a promotion, for example. And counselling is when someone requests a meeting in private and confidential setting to deal with difficulties. So, for example, let's look at number 5, Milena. Milena is the youngest board member company's ever had. She'd like to develop her strategic understanding as quickly as possible. What does she need? Coaching, counselling, or mentoring? Number 5. Probably mentoring. Maybe from another board member to brief her on how it looks like for a board member. Or here, number 3, Anna used to be a good team member who was always willing to help. Lately she's become very rude and irritable with colleagues and customers. What does she need? Counselling, yeah. Okay. And each of these things need very, very different sets of skills. The language skills that these people need to perform these functions are very, very different. Another example I mentioned about HR branding. In this company, in an imaginary company, the HR department carried out a survey of their employees to find out how do you see your HR department. So look at these 5 possible roles for HR. Which role would you like your HR department to play? And the person was chosen administrator. Okay. Look at these words and phrases. Choose 3 that describe your HR department. approachable, efficient, reliable. It's good news. Good. This is a disaster for HR. When they get something like this, they know they've failed in their job. Do you know why? Do you know what do HR people want to be seen as? Not even advisor, partner. They want to be really at the top of the company, the most important people in the company. And in terms of these adjectives, which ones do you think they should be? I'll tell you, they want to be dynamic and creative, proactive, and even radical. They want to be leading the company, not just dealing with boring issues. They want to be actually guiding the company and taking the company forward, because they can actually make a lot of difference to the success of the company. The point I'm really making here is that we as teachers cannot guess this, and we can't use our intuitions. We need to speak to experts. Okay, the last one is they know exactly what they need, but it's too specialised. And this is probably the thing that scares most people, most ESP teachers or beginner ESP teachers. How on earth can I teach them something when I'm not an expert, when I don't know what they're doing? I don't have a magic wand to solve this problem, but my personal feeling is that English teachers have a lot to offer in ESP. That our skills as teachers are in many ways more important than subject knowledge. If you don't know about law, but you're trying to learn, and you're a good teacher, and you know how people learn languages, and you know how language works, I would say that's more important and more valuable than somebody who's a lawyer, who knows everything about law, but doesn't know how to teach. For me, teaching skills are more important than subject specialisms, whatever. You can learn vocabulary. You can try to learn what your students do in their job. You can take an interest and you can learn actively, and you should. You can't just say, okay, I'm a teacher and it's not my problem. We need to try hard and study this. But the most important thing we can bring is our skills as teachers, how to manage classes, how to motivate them, and how to get them to learn the language. And get them to use the language in real life. Sorry, I went off in a different direction here. I was supposed to be talking about specialised skills. My policy is always don't pretend to be what you're not. Don't pretend to be an expert when you're not an expert. You're an English teacher, and that's fine. An English teacher is an important person and has a lot of skills. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an air traffic controller, but that's okay. Don't be ashamed. You can still provide a really useful service. And I think that was my problem at the beginning. I used to feel ashamed when I started teaching legal English. Oh God, I don't know what I'm talking about, and these guys are so clever, and I'm so stupid. There's no need to be ashamed. I used to feel like this, and then I saw how the lawyers were teaching legal English. And I thought, okay, I'm better than that. I am much better than that. And that's what we've got to remember. We are good. We don't need to be ashamed. Learn from your students. I mentioned this before. Write things down. Learn actively from your students, and you can really get better. And bring an expert into the classroom. By this I mean, if you've got the internet, bring the internet and use a dictionary, online dictionary search. You can use Wikipedia, or bring a teacher's book, for example. What have I got here? Experts. I just want to show you my series again and remind you that the people who wrote these books are subject experts. For example, Virginia, who was one of the authors of our nursing books, is a nurse. He's a nurse trainer. Mark, who wrote the engineering book, he's an engineer. Nick, who wrote the marketing book, is a marketing specialist. I mentioned George, who wrote the human resources book, is a human resources guru. And I could go on. Townsend, who wrote scientist, she's a scientist. So my job really was to work with them to bring out their expertise. So if you've got a course book, it does have that expertise, and I think that's very, very important. Okay, have I talked about that before? No, there's something I haven't. Yeah, everyone's needs are important, but we mustn't ignore our own needs as teachers. How are we doing for time? Loads of time. Okay, what do I mean? This is an example again from flying. Sorry to bring in lots of aviation today. It's really the fourth picture that I'm interested in here. You come across this picture when you're flying that we're supposed to put on our own masks before we put our children's masks on. And even though our instincts as parents, I'm a parent, I've got small children, my instinct is to look after your children, always look after your children first. But in this situation, that's actually very dangerous. You need to look after yourself before you look after other people. And as teachers, we have a similar situation. Learners, look after the learners, protect them, help them and guide them, but we also need to think about ourselves first and make sure we have the resources that we need and don't just give everything to our learners. So my message here is, yeah, we can't help other people until our own basic needs are met. We need to respect ourselves as teachers a little bit more. Have you seen this before? Yeah, so if you studied psychology or sociology or marketing or something, this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The idea is that you've got needs at the bottom, which are your basic needs, and if you've got higher level needs, there's no point in fulfilling higher level needs until your basic needs are fulfilled. That's the basis of the theory. This is slightly different. This is Jeremy's hierarchy of needs, or teachers of business English and ESP, so it's slightly different. So at the bottom we've got basic needs like oxygen, food, money. Okay, so we all need those as teachers. Slightly above that, we have teaching materials. If you've ever taught an ESP course without materials, where you had to create your own materials yourself, it is difficult. Yes?
Yes.
And then, to go from that to teaching with a course book, it's, so nice. So nice. I had this with legal English, exactly. I wrote I wrote this course for the British Council, and as a result of that, I was invited to work on the Cambridge course for legal English. And it was, in a way, it was wonderful, but in a way it was quite frustrating because I just spent a year writing this thing for the British Council. It was horrible for me, horrible experience, and then I worked on this thing for Cambridge, and it was like, oh yes, at last. Much easier. So teaching materials can make a lot of difference. Above that, we've got this thing, credibility. Not to look stupid. I have a lot of experience of looking stupid in front of my students, especially legal English students. I've had many lessons where you just want to crawl into a hole in the ground and say, no, so how much longer? Yeah, it's horrible. We need to get beyond that, and I think that's something that publishers and people involved in ELT publishing can help with. A little bit about that, we've got confidence to be useful. I talked about this earlier about feeling, yes, I'm a teacher and I can actually bring something useful to this classroom. I'm not just a loser who doesn't know what I'm doing, I can actually help them here. A little bit about that, we've got flexibility where it starts to be fun and you can mix and match. You can take a little bit of this and a little bit of that and change the lesson in the middle and actually really start to enjoy it. And that's something I think I've got to the stage with my ESP teaching. Then at the top of Maslow's hierarchy, and I've also got it on mine as well, self-actualization. This is a joke, by the way. This is when it becomes part of who you are and you become a whole person. Don't worry too much. Don't write this down, please. Okay. Yeah, but in some ways I feel as if that's kind of what the stage I've got to with my ESP, that I now identify myself as a guy who does ESP, and I think that's nice. It's nice to say that. Okay, what do all of this come down to? Well, actually not all of this. I can't help you with this, and I can't help you with this at the bottom, but the things in the middle come down to support. And that's, I think, my role as the writer of teachers' books and as an editor of ESP books. I'm just going to run through some examples of the support you can get now for ESP courses. The first thing is teachers' books. And teachers' books, I don't know if you have this experience, teaching general English, the first year, maybe half a year, you use teachers' books. Maybe it's just me. My first year, I used teachers' books. Oh, now do exercise 1. Okay. What's next? Now do exercise 2. Okay, do that. Okay. And I very quickly stopped using teachers' books when I was a teacher. In ESP, it's different. It's completely different. You need a teacher's book. Unless you're a specialist, you need a teacher's book to guide you through, to answer all of your difficult questions. Because it can be terrifying if you don't have that. The teacher's book, they have this step-by-step guidance, but they also have very detailed sample answers, which you couldn't guess. For example, in our aviation teacher's book, half the book is sample answers. Half the book. Lots of background information, background to the jargon and the technical concepts, so in the legal English book, it's full of information about explaining how this particular legal problem works, using down-to-earth, everyday examples that English teachers like me can understand. Lots of language notes as well, so things about the grammar and the vocabulary. You'll also find lots of extension ideas, discussion activities, how to take things forward, and supplementary activities, so photocopyable worksheets and so on. This makes a lot of difference, I think, to the experience. I said about flexibility in the classroom and enjoying yourself. This makes a lot of difference. I mentioned at the top, some of them are free. A lot of these are free online. So there's, I showed you earlier the book for legal English and for aviation English. The other ones all have free online teacher's notes. So for example, if you go to Dynamic Presentations website, or go to the Cambridge website, Dynamic Presentations, resources, and here you'll find the trainer's notes. And as I said, this is something I wrote, so they're really good. And you've got these for all the books in my series. You've also got these for all the books in this series as well. This is the business skills series. So you've seen Dynamic Presentations by Mark Powell, wonderful book, by the way. International Negotiation, also by Mark Powell, also a wonderful book. Communicating Across Cultures, also a wonderful book. We learned this morning in the first plenary about a lot of this cross-cultural communication skills, and this is what this book is all about, stereotypes, and going beyond stereotypes to actually practically interacting with people in business internationally. So again, the teacher's notes, the trainer's notes for this, these are all free and online, and I've written these. I'm working on the fourth one at the moment. You also get glossaries and word lists. Very often these are online as well. Very useful for making vocabulary revision games. You just download the word list and you can make all sorts of vocabulary revision games, which I'm not going to explain now, but this is something I do all the time. Pronunciation. For example, on our online word list, you can click and you can hear the pronunciation. So it's very, very useful for nursing, medical English terms. These books also have resource sites. So they may have case studies. We've got these for our engineering course. Research tasks. We've got these for the legal English. Wonderful research tasks. Grammar worksheets. I wrote these for the nursing course. There are interactive games, which you'll see on the legal English site. Oh, here we go. There are lots of interactive games. Lawyers, actually, are surprisingly, they love playing games. And these games relate to the word list from the book, from each unit of the book. There's a fantastic website for International Legal English, full of these games. These are the grammar worksheets for nursing. Again, I wrote these some years ago. Professional English Online, has anybody come across this one? Very nice website, again from Cambridge. This is a website for teachers at ESP and Business English, and it's full of free stuff. Again, every month there are free activities, lesson plans basically. I used to write these. Jargon Busters, so lessons based on financial English jargon. There's a blog. There are articles about teaching business and about teaching ESP. There are interviews and podcasts and video podcasts, and there's a quote of the week, so you can generate classroom discussions about the latest news story. Again, I used to write this. This is the website, Professional English Online. If you just search for the term, where it's in the Cambridge catalogue, you'll find this very, very nice site and explore all the things down here. There's loads of stuff. Just very briefly, just to finish off with, I just want to summarise some trends in ESP and Business English. One of the biggest trends is towards shorter courses. I don't know if I haven't got the books with me, but the books that I've been showing you from my series and the Business Skills series are actually quite small. This is very nice because it means that you don't have to have one book for the whole semester. You can actually have a course that's a little bit of everything. You can have a course which has some presentations and some job hunting skills and maybe some grammar, and you can create your own course using this and this and this, and you can mix and match to tailor it to your learners' particular needs. Are you familiar with the Mark Powell's old presentations book, which was called Presenting in English? It was also a very, very nice book, but I always used the first 5 pages and never used the rest of it, because it yeah, the first 5 pages are wonderful, and then it kind of got a bit boring. The new presentations book is all really good, but because it's small, so it's condensed, it's only the best bits. So they're a lot shorter now. There are also more specialised courses. In the past, you didn't even have legal English. And now you've got not just legal English, and not just medical English, but you've got English for nurses, and you've got English for, I don't know, all sorts of other things as well. Another trend is towards much more support for teachers, and I've talked about that already quite a lot. And this flexibility. I've talked a little bit about this. I just want to show you one thing. I mentioned all of these things at the moment that we need to include in our needs analysis. And my question is, do they all need to come from the same book? Traditionally, we've all been looking for that one book that meets all of our needs. And it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. You can't get a book which meets all of your needs. So we need to start using this mix and match approach if we're serious about teaching our learners exactly what they need. I'll just show you very briefly. Have you come across English 360? You should. Okay, if you're teaching business English or ESP, this is an online platform which allows you to do exactly this, to bring content from different sources and merge them together into one course. And you can add your own materials as well. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. It's full of Cambridge resources as well. It used to be part of Cambridge University Press, and it's just gone independent now, but it's full of Cambridge University Press materials. I work for these people, by the way, that's why I mentioned this. So just to sum up, whose needs are important, do you remember? Hello? Students, teachers, someone else, and the institutes, the person paying for it. Okay, very good. What's the problem with needs? Do you remember this? They don't know what they need. They don't. Yeah. Okay, yeah, I think you got that. Okay, good. What do teachers need? Credibility, confidence, flexibility, and support. Support. Okay, good. Does everything have to come in the same course book?
No.
Oh, okay. Whose books are you going to buy?
Yours.
Okay, this is my email address. You feel very free to contact me about anything. This is the, oh sorry, that's the Polish website. Oh sorry, okay. You know the local Cambridge website. Go to the cambridge.org/HR. Search for Cambridge University Press on the internet, you'll find it. Okay, or look in the catalog. PEO is the website, it's Professional English Online, I've just shown you, and English 360 is the people I work for. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
I just want to say, if anybody's interested, and I'm sure you are, we've got a good selection of all the books Jeremy mentioned, except Legal English, because that was published a couple of years ago. But all the books, CSP books, are here right next door. So you're most welcome to come and get all other information, how to contact Jeremy, where to buy the books, etc. Okay? We're here 2 days, so you don't have to rush this minute. But do visit us. Thank you, Jeremy. That was very, very instructive. Very well. Jeremy, you end with